I let my activist wife preach equality online until I forced a revolution at home and exposed the hypocrisy behind her invisible labor demands forever. She was preaching about how every person deserves respect and fair treatment, while I watched from the kitchen window, scrubbing the dishes she had left from her morning strategy meeting with fellow activists. The irony was not lost on me, but it took me 3 years of marriage to finally see the full picture. She calls herself a revolutionary, posting daily on social media about dismantling oppressive systems, organizing community protests, and fighting for women's rights. Her online presence is impressive, I will give her that. Thousands of followers hang on her every word about creating a more equitable world. What they do not see is what happens when she comes home from those rallies. The transformation is instant. The passionate fighter for justice becomes someone who cannot be bothered to pick up her own coffee mug. The woman who gives speeches about equal responsibility suddenly develops selective blindness when it comes to household chores. She will spend hours crafting the perfect post about shared labor being the foundation of a fair society. Then she will leave her dirty clothes scattered across our bedroom floor. Last month, she organized a fundraiser for women's shelters. She spent weeks coordinating volunteers, booking venues, and creating promotional materials. The event raised $12,000, and she was rightfully proud, but during those same weeks, I cooked every meal, did every load of laundry, and cleaned every surface in our house. When I mentioned feeling overwhelmed, she told me I was being unsupportive of her important work. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago. She was preparing for what she called her most important speech yet, about recognizing the invisible labor women do in society. She practiced it in our living room while I vacuumed around her, prepared her lunch, and organized her research papers. The speech was brilliant, I admit. She talked about how society expects women to manage households without recognition, how domestic work is undervalued and overlooked. The applause she received was thunderous. Her social media exploded with praise. People called her inspirational, a voice for change, a true revolutionary. Meanwhile, I sat in our car afterward, watching her bask in the attention, realizing she had just been applauded for describing exactly what I had been doing for her for years. But what really opened my eyes was the conversation that followed. On the drive home, she was exhilarated, talking about how she had really connected with people about invisible labor. I made what I thought was an innocent observation about how her speech resonated with my own experience managing our household. Her response floored me. "That is completely different," she said without hesitation. "You are a man. Domestic work is not the same kind of oppression for you. Besides, I am doing revolutionary work that actually matters. Someone has to handle the little things so I can focus on changing the world." The little things. That is what she called the daily maintenance of our shared life. Cooking, cleaning, shopping, organizing, budgeting, all the tasks that kept our world functioning, while she focused on revolutionizing everyone else's. I realized then that my wife had created her own version of revolution, one where she got to be both the oppressed victim fighting the system and the privileged beneficiary of someone else's invisible labor. She had built an entire identity around fighting inequality while practicing the most basic form of it in her own home. The next morning, I watched her post another inspiring message about recognizing women's unpaid labor, while her breakfast dishes sat unwashed on the table. She shared articles about domestic responsibility being everyone's job, while stepping over the laundry basket I had been asking her to help with for a week. That is when I understood what needed to happen. My wife wanted a revolution. She was about to get exactly what she had been preaching about: real equality, genuine shared responsibility, and actual consequences for those who do not contribute. She just never expected the revolution to start in her own home, with her own husband as the one demanding the change she claimed to believe in. I spent the rest of that day watching her routine with new eyes. Every ignored task, every assumption that I would handle it, every moment where she chose her causes over our partnership. She was passionate about fighting oppression everywhere except the one place where she was actively participating in it. Time for her to experience the revolution she had been talking about all along. I chose the perfect moment to have our conversation. She was at the kitchen table, laptop open, working on what she called her revolutionary manifesto for domestic equality, while I stood at the sink washing the dishes from her latest activist gathering. The symbolism was so perfect I almost laughed. "We need to talk about something," I said, turning off the water and facing her directly, "about the gap between what you preach and what you practice." She barely looked up from her screen. "Can this wait?" I am on a deadline for the community newsletter. We are launching a campaign about shared household responsibilities. Actually, that is exactly what I want to discuss. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. Your campaign about shared household responsibilities. Now I had her attention. She closed the laptop halfway and gave me that look she usually reserved for people who challenged her at public meetings. What about it? Well, I am curious about how you plan to implement these shared responsibilities in our own home, leading by example. Her expression shifted from mild annoyance to defensive alertness. What is that supposed to mean? It means you have spent the last 3 hours writing about domestic equality while I have cleaned up after your meeting, prepared dinner, and handled the laundry you have been ignoring for 4 days. I am wondering when the sharing part kicks in. She straightened in her chair, and I could see her switching into activist mode. Are you seriously attacking my work right now? Do you have any idea how important these initiatives are? I am trying to create real change in our community. I am not attacking your work. I am asking about your consistency. You give speeches about recognizing invisible labor while making mine completely invisible. You write about equal partnerships while treating me like hired help. That is not what is happening here. Her voice took on that lecturing tone she used at rallies. You are completely misunderstanding the dynamics of revolutionary work. Someone has to handle the day-to-day stuff, so the real change-makers can focus on the bigger picture. I had to admire her ability to reframe exploitation as revolutionary necessity. So, in your revolutionary world, who exactly handles the day-to-day stuff for the change-makers? People who understand the importance of supporting the movement? She was fully committed to this logic now. Besides, domestic work is not oppressive when it is voluntary. You choose to do these things. Voluntary? I leaned back in my chair. When exactly did I volunteer to be your personal assistant while you revolutionize the world? You are being ridiculous. This is not about gender roles or oppression. This is about practical division of labor based on our respective contributions to society. Oh, I see. So, your contributions to society matter more than your contributions to our marriage. She slammed her laptop shut. Do not twist my words. You know what I do is important. I am fighting systems of oppression, organizing communities, giving voice to the voiceless. That takes dedication and focus, and apparently a full-time domestic staff. You are really going to make this about housework right now, when I am trying to create meaningful change? She stood up, pacing to the window. I expected better from you. I thought you understood the importance of what I am doing. I do understand the importance of what you are doing. That is why I am confused about why you are not doing it at home. She whirled around, eyes flashing. What is that supposed to mean? It means you are fighting for equality everywhere except where it matters most. You demand that society recognize women's invisible labor, while making sure yours stays visible and mine disappears. You preach about shared responsibility while practicing selective participation. You are being completely unfair. I contribute to this household in ways you do not even recognize. My work brings meaning to our lives, gives us purpose beyond just existing, and my work pays the bills that fund your revolutionary activities. But somehow that is not as meaningful. That is not the same thing at all. She was getting frustrated now, falling back on talking points instead of addressing the actual issue. You have a job. I have a calling. There is a difference, right? Your calling requires me to subsidize your lifestyle while you save the world. Got it. Why are you being so hostile about this? You have never complained before, because I finally realized what you have been doing. You have created the perfect setup. You get to be the hero fighting oppression while practicing it at home. You get the recognition for revolutionary thinking while maintaining the most traditional arrangement possible in our marriage. Her face flushed red. How dare you accuse me of being traditional? Everything I do challenges traditional power structures, except in the one place where you have actual power here. You are perfectly comfortable with traditional gender roles as long as they benefit you. This conversation is over. She moved toward the door. When you are ready to have a mature discussion about supporting social justice instead of undermining it with petty complaints about housework, let me know. Actually, this conversation is just getting started, but you are right about one thing. It is time for some social justice, starting right here with us. She paused at the doorway, turning back with a condescending smile. What is that supposed to mean? It means you are about to get exactly what you have been asking for. Real equality, genuine shared responsibility, and actual consequences for those who do not participate. You want revolution? You are going to get it. You are being dramatic. Am I? We will see. From now on, everything you preach about publicly, we practice privately. Every principle you champion, every standard you demand from society, that is our new normal. Fine by me. I have always believed in practicing what I preach. I smiled, knowing she had no idea what she just agreed to. Perfect. I am glad we are finally on the same page about revolutionary change starting at home. The next morning, I watched my wife post her daily inspiration on social media. Revolution begins with small acts of resistance against unjust systems. Each person must examine their own role in perpetuating inequality. The likes poured in immediately. Her followers loved her wisdom about personal accountability and social change. She posted this while eating the breakfast I had prepared, wearing the clothes I had washed, at the table I had cleared. The contradiction was so stark it was almost artistic. But instead of getting frustrated, I felt energized. She had given me the perfect framework for what came next. Revolution through small acts of resistance against unjust systems, personal accountability, examining roles in perpetuating inequality. Her own words would be my blueprint. I spent the day studying her content like a research project. 3 years of posts, speeches, and manifestos about social justice, all archived and accessible. The themes were consistent: equal distribution of labor, accountability for those in positions of privilege, dismantling systems that exploit the vulnerable, and creating consequences for those who benefit from inequality. She had entire threads dedicated to privileged individuals who benefit from others' invisible work, without acknowledgement or reciprocity. She had written passionate pieces about people who make moral claims publicly while practicing the opposite privately. Her most shared post was about holding leaders accountable to their own stated values. It was like she had been writing my instruction manual without realizing it. I started documenting everything with the methodical approach she used for her community organizing: daily schedules, task distributions, financial contributions, time allocations. The data was overwhelming. Over the past month, I had handled 93% of household management while she had contributed 7%. She had spent 42 hours on activism activities while I had spent 68 hours maintaining our shared life. But real revelation came when I calculated the financials. Her revolutionary work generated zero income. The fundraisers and awareness campaigns she organized raised money for causes, never for her. Meanwhile, my income funded not only our basic needs, but also her activist supplies, travel expenses for protests, and the flexible schedule that allowed her to be available for every social justice emergency. She was living the exact lifestyle she publicly criticized, someone whose moral activism was subsidized by another person's invisible labor and financial support. The only difference was that instead of a traditional housewife supporting a working husband, she was a traditional activist being supported by a working spouse. That evening, I watched her prepare for another community meeting. She spent 1 hour getting ready, practicing her speech about dismantling power structures that allow some people to benefit from others' work without reciprocity. Meanwhile, I packed her materials, prepared snacks for the meeting, and handled the dinner dishes she had left behind. "Could you drop me off tonight?" she asked, not looking up from her notes. "I want to review my presentation during the drive instead of focusing on traffic." "Of course," I said. But for the first time in years, I was calculating the cost, gas, time, the dinner prep I would have to rush through, the cleanup waiting when we returned. All invisible labor supporting her visible activism. After dropping her off, I drove to the office supply store and purchased something I never thought I would need in my marriage: a large whiteboard and colored markers. If she wanted to run our household like a revolutionary organization, we would need the proper visual aids. I set up the board in our kitchen, the same space where she held her strategy meetings with fellow activists. This seemed appropriate since our home was about to become her most important social justice project. At the top, I wrote her favorite quote from her most popular post: "True equality requires equal participation, equal accountability, and equal consequences for inaction." Below that, I created 2 columns: revolutionary principles and home implementation. On the left, I listed every major theme from her public advocacy work: equal distribution of labor, accountability for privileged individuals, consequences for those who exploit others' work, recognition of invisible contributions, dismantling systems that benefit some at others' expense. On the right, I left the implementation column blank. That would be filled in together, using her own methodology for creating social change. The final touch was a printed copy of her most shared manifesto taped to the refrigerator, the one about how revolutionary change requires people to examine their own complicity in perpetuating inequality. even when that examination makes them uncomfortable. When I picked her up after the meeting, she was energized from what she described as a breakthrough session about accountability in activist communities. She spent the drive home talking about how they developed strategies for ensuring everyone contributed equally to their shared goals. "It is amazing what happens when you hold people accountable to their stated values," she said as we pulled into our driveway. "Some people resist at first, but real revolutionaries embrace the challenge of living up to their principles." "I could not agree more," I said, thinking about the whiteboard waiting in our kitchen. She was still talking about the importance of personal accountability as we walked through the front door. Her voice trailed off when she saw the kitchen setup. "What is all this?" "Your next revolutionary project. The most important one you will ever work on." She approached the whiteboard slowly, reading her own words reflected back at her. "I do not understand." "You said revolution begins with small acts of resistance against unjust systems. You said people need to examine their role in perpetuating inequality. You said real revolutionaries embrace accountability challenges." I picked up a red marker. Time to put those principles to work where they matter most. This is our home, not a community organization. According to your own posts, revolutionary principles should guide every aspect of our lives, especially our most intimate relationships. You have said that dozens of times. She stared at the board, then at me. For the first time in our marriage, I saw uncertainty in her eyes instead of confidence. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I am not proposing anything. I am implementing everything you have already proposed. Starting tomorrow, our household operates according to every principle you have championed publicly: equal participation, transparent accountability, and meaningful consequences for those who do not contribute." "You are being ridiculous." "Am I, or am I being revolutionary?" The revolution began at 6 a.m. sharp on a Saturday morning. I woke up, made my own coffee, and sat down at the kitchen table with the implementation plan I had finalized the night before. When my wife stumbled downstairs an hour later, expecting her usual weekend morning routine of breakfast in bed and a leisurely start to her day, she found me calmly reading the newspaper with an empty kitchen around us. "Where is breakfast?" she asked, opening cabinets with increasing confusion. "Great question. According to the revolutionary principles you have outlined, breakfast is the responsibility of whoever wants to eat it. Feel free to make yours whenever you are ready." She laughed, assuming I was making some kind of joke. "Very funny, but seriously, I have that strategy meeting at 10 o'clock, so I need to eat something soon." "Then I would suggest getting started. The meeting is your responsibility, so the preparation for it is too." "You are really doing this? The whole dramatic protest thing?" "I am not protesting anything. I'm implementing the equality framework you have been advocating for 3 years. I folded the newspaper and stood up. "From now on, every task in this household gets divided according to your own stated principles about fair distribution of labor." She opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents as if seeing them for the first time. "This is childish. Is it childish when you apply these same principles to community organizations? When you demand that privileged members contribute equally instead of relying on others to do the work? That is completely different." "How exactly?" She closed the refrigerator door harder than necessary. "Because those are voluntary organizations, working towards social change. This is our home, right? Our home, where we both live, both benefit from the comfort and organization, and therefore both should contribute equally. Unless you think homes are exempt from revolutionary principles." The confusion on her face was genuine. She had spent so many years talking about equality without applying it to her own life that the practical reality was foreign to her. Watching her try to make breakfast was like watching someone use tools they had only read about in books. "Fine," she said after burning the first piece of toast. "I can handle breakfast, but I still have that meeting to prepare for." "Absolutely. Your meeting, your preparation, just like my work meetings, are my responsibility. But you usually help me organize my materials, and usually help me with my work projects, right?" I waited while she processed that question. "Actually, when is the last time you helped me prepare for anything work-related?" She had no answer because there was not one. In 3 years of marriage, she had never once offered to help with my professional responsibilities. My work was invisible to her, something that happened in the background to fund her revolutionary lifestyle. The morning continued with small revelations. She could not find her presentation notes because she had never organized them herself. She could not locate her good jacket because she had never been responsible for laundry. She could not prepare her usual meeting snacks because she had never actually planned or shopped for them. By 9:30, she was frantic. This is sabotage. You are deliberately making me look unprepared. I am not making you anything. I am simply not doing the invisible work that usually makes you appear organized. The question is, why does your revolutionary work depend on someone else handling all the logistics? Because partnership means supporting each other's important work. I agree completely. So, when do I get that support for my work? Your work does not need the same kind of support. My work pays for your activism. Without my income, there would be no supplies, no travel, no flexible schedule for your causes. But somehow that contribution is less important than organizing your paperwork. She grabbed her keys, clearly frustrated. We will talk about this when I get back. Actually, we will not. You have 3 other meetings this week, and according to your own principles about shared responsibility, those are entirely your domain now. I will be focusing on my work with the same level of dedication you have shown yours. The house felt different after she left, peaceful but also strange. For 3 years, my Saturdays had been structured around her schedule, her meetings, her activist emergencies. Now I had an entire day to myself, and I realized I had forgotten what that felt like. I spent the morning reading, something I had not done leisurely in months. Around noon, I made myself lunch without automatically preparing extra for whenever she returned. The afternoon was mine to enjoy without coordinating around her revolutionary obligations. She came home around 4 o'clock, clearly expecting me to ask about her meeting and her day. Instead, I was in the backyard reading in a lawn chair I had never had time to sit in before. "How was your day?" she asked, but her tone was different, less assumption, more uncertainty. Productive, peaceful. I got a lot done when I did not have to manage anyone else's schedule. The meeting was a disaster. I could not find half my materials, showed up unprepared, and had to improvise most of my presentation. That sounds frustrating. What is your plan for being better prepared next time? She stared at me. My plan? Well, it is your meeting, your presentation, your responsibility. I assume you will develop systems to handle it more effectively. You're really not going to help me anymore? I am absolutely going to help you the same amount you help me with my responsibilities. When you start contributing equally to the invisible work that keeps our life functioning, I will start contributing equally to making your activism possible. This is punishment. No, this is equality. The kind you have been advocating for in every public forum available to you. I am just applying your own revolutionary principles to our marriage. That evening, she attempted to make dinner. The result was edible but chaotic, with every dish in the kitchen dirty and ingredients scattered across every surface. She looked overwhelmed by the cleanup required. Need help? I asked from the doorway. Yes, obviously. Great. I would be happy to clean up after dinner. In exchange, you can handle the laundry that needs to be done tomorrow. That is not how partnership works. Really? Because for 3 years, partnership has meant I handle the household management while you handle the world changing. I am just suggesting we try actual partnership instead of the arrangement where one person does everything, while the other gets credit for moral superiority. She spent 20 minutes cleaning up after a simple meal, growing more frustrated with each dish. When she finished, she turned to me with an expression I had never seen before. How do you do this every day? Practice. Lots of practice. The same way you learn to give compelling speeches and organize effective protests. But this is just maintenance. Boring, repetitive maintenance, right? The boring, repetitive maintenance that makes it possible for you to focus on the exciting, meaningful work. The question is, why should that burden fall entirely on me? For the first time in our marriage, she had no answer. Week 2 of our domestic revolution brought desperation. My wife tried every manipulation tactic in her activist playbook, but I countered each one with her own published principles about accountability and equal participation. First came the guilt trip. You are sabotaging important social justice work over petty household complaints. Actually, I am ensuring that social justice begins at home. You cannot fight inequality publicly while practicing it privately. Then the victim narrative. You are punishing me for caring about making the world better. I am holding you accountable to your stated values. That is what real revolutionaries do. By Thursday, she was exhausted. 3 failed attempts at meal planning, 2 mornings late to meetings because she could not find organized materials, and 1 completely missed conference call because she had never learned to manage her own calendar. Her revolutionary facade was cracking under the weight of actual equality. This is not sustainable, she announced over another chaotic dinner she prepared. I cannot maintain my activism work and handle all these domestic tasks. Welcome to my world for the past 3 years. The difference is I was doing both while you did not either. That is not fair. My work contributes to society, and my work contributes to our survival. Plus, all the domestic labor you now realize is actually work. She called her activist friend for support, putting the conversation on speaker while doing dishes. He is being completely unreasonable, she complained, demanding I do housework when I have important causes to focus on. Her friend's response surprised her. Wait, you were not already sharing household responsibilities? How is that possible when you give speeches about domestic equality? The silence stretched uncomfortably long. It is complicated, my wife finally said. Is it? Because it sounds like you have been practicing exactly what you publicly criticize. Friday brought her breaking point. She planned to host a strategy meeting at our house, but when her activist friends arrived, they found chaos, unwashed dishes, unorganized spaces, no prepared refreshments. The meeting that was supposed to showcase her organizational skills instead revealed her dependence on invisible labor. What happened here? One activist asked, looking around our typically pristine kitchen. We are implementing shared domestic responsibilities, my wife explained weakly. Good for you. It is about time activists practiced what they preached at home. The irony was perfect. Her own community was applauding the very equality she was desperately trying to escape. They assumed she was finally living her values instead of being forced to confront her hypocrisy. During the meeting, I stayed in the background but visible, reading quietly while they discussed community organizing. Every few minutes, someone would ask my wife for materials, snacks, or logistical support she could not provide. Each failure reinforced the reality of how much invisible work had been propping up her visible activism. Maybe we should meet at my place next time, one friend suggested diplomatically after my wife could not locate the presentation materials 3 different people had asked for. After everyone left, she slumped at the kitchen table looking defeated. I cannot do this anymore. Do what? Practice the equality you have been preaching? You know what I mean. I cannot maintain everything, right? That is exactly what I have been telling you for months. The difference is I was maintaining everything while you maintained nothing. So, what is your solution? We just live in chaos? My solution is actual partnership, real shared responsibility, the kind you advocate for publicly but have never practiced privately. She looked around at the dishes, the unswept floor, the general disorder that represented 1 week of her handling her own responsibilities. How did you manage all this plus your job? Very carefully, with a lot of stress, and by sacrificing every personal interest I had. Sound familiar? I never asked you to sacrifice your interests. You just made it impossible for me to maintain them. There is a difference. That night, she tried one final manipulation. She posted on social media about the challenges of implementing revolutionary principles in intimate relationships, and how some partners resist equality when it requires them to examine their own privilege. The response was not what she expected. Her followers assumed she was talking about finally getting her partner to contribute equally, and they praised her for demanding better treatment. The comments section filled with support for her brave stand against domestic inequality. She deleted the post within an hour. The revolution is not going the way you planned, is it? I asked, watching her close her laptop with frustration. This is not revolution. This is punishment. No, this is consequences, the natural result of practicing what you preach. The final phase of our domestic revolution came 3 weeks later during her monthly community leadership meeting. She had struggled through the preparation alone, and I could see the stress wearing on her. But instead of acknowledging the lesson, she decided to make one last attempt at manipulation. I need to address something with the group, she announced during dinner, about how personal relationships can undermine activist work when partners do not support revolutionary principles. Interesting topic. Are you going to discuss how activists who do not practice their principles at home undermine their own credibility? She ignored me and continued. I am going to talk about the challenges of maintaining social justice work when dealing with resistance at home. Perfect. I would like to contribute to that discussion. What do you mean? I mean, I would like to share my perspective on how activists can practice revolutionary principles in their personal lives. Lead by example. Her face went pale. You do not need to come to my meeting. Actually, I think I do. If we are going to discuss the intersection of personal relationships and revolutionary work, both partners should participate. The meeting was held at the community center where she had given dozens of speeches about equality and justice. When we arrived, she tried to position herself away from me, but I sat directly beside her, notebook in hand. Tonight we are discussing authentic revolutionary practice, she began nervously, and how to maintain our principles even when it is challenging. That is a perfect topic, I said, standing up. I would like to share some observations about the gap between revolutionary theory and practice. 20 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My wife looked mortified. For the past month, we have been implementing the equality principles you have all advocated for in our own household: equal distribution of labor, shared accountability, transparent contribution tracking. The results have been enlightening. I pulled out the notebook where I had been documenting everything. It turns out that practicing revolutionary principles requires actual sacrifice from those who benefit from inequality. My wife discovered that her activist work was subsidized by my invisible domestic labor and financial support. The room was completely silent. She learned that equality is not just a concept to apply to others. It is a practice that starts in your own home. The question for all of us is, how can we demand equality from society when we do not practice it ourselves? One activist raised her hand. Are you saying we should focus less on community organizing? Not at all. I am saying that our community organizing is only credible when we live our principles privately. Revolution without personal accountability is just performance. My wife tried to interject. This is really more of a private matter. Is it? I turned to face her directly. You have made our relationship public by using it as material for your activism. You have posted about household equality while practicing household inequality. You have given speeches about recognizing invisible labor while making mine invisible. The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs. Several activists were nodding, recognizing the contradiction. The real question, I continued, is whether we are here to create actual change, or just to feel better about ourselves while maintaining the same power structures in our personal lives. An older activist in the back spoke up. He is right. We cannot fight oppression publicly while practicing it privately. That makes us hypocrites, not revolutionaries. My wife's face was red with embarrassment and anger. You are completely misrepresenting, am I? Let us review the facts. I opened my notebook. Over the past 3 years, what percentage of household labor have you contributed? What percentage of financial support have you provided? What percentage of logistical coordination for your own activism have you handled? She had no answer because we both knew the numbers. Revolution is not about pointing fingers at others, I said to the group. It is about examining our own participation in the systems we claim to oppose. My wife has been fighting inequality everywhere except where she had the power to practice equality. The meeting continued, but the dynamic had completely shifted. Instead of discussing how to overcome external resistance, they found themselves examining their own consistency between public principles and private practices. After everyone left, my wife and I sat in my car in uncomfortable silence. You humiliated me, she finally said. No, I held you accountable. There is a difference. In front of my entire community, the same community you have been misleading about your commitment to equality. They deserve to know the truth about your revolutionary credentials. She stared out the window. So, what happens now? Now you decide whether you want to be an actual revolutionary or just someone who plays one for social media. Because those are your only two options. And if I choose to be actual, then we start over. Real partnership, genuine equality, shared responsibility for everything. Your activism, our household, my career, our future, all of it gets equal attention and equal effort from both of us. And if I do not, then you can find someone else to subsidize your performance activism while you preach about equality. But it will not be me. We drove home in silence. But I could see her thinking. For the first time in our marriage, she was confronting the real cost of her revolutionary ideals. The next morning I found her in the kitchen making breakfast for both of us. It was not perfect, but it was a start. I want to try, she said quietly. The real version, not the performance version. I poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. Then let us revolutionize our marriage for real this time. She nodded. And for the first time in 3 years, we sat down as actual equals to plan our shared future. Our story has come to an end. If you have made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I have selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you will enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I will be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.